Thank you, Jonathan. Today, I want to offer you a powerful perspective on homelessness. Homelessness, very simply, is the label we use for someone who lacks a regular, safe place to sleep at night. This includes those sleeping outside, in a vehicle or abandoned building, in an emergency or transitional shelter, or those fleeing domestic violence. But the real truth about homelessness is not found in unpacking its definition or the often referenced root causes, or even in unwinding the funding sources and regulations intended to solve this complex social issue. The truth is in what homelessness actually represents in our society. Homelessness is the walking, talking, sleeping on my sidewalk manifestation of failure. Confronting failure is a very scary thing. It feels so impossible to comprehend this kind of failure, that a person could make the choice to live like this, that a society could allow this. We often have a very visceral reaction to homelessness, oscillating between pity, disgust, and outrage. If we step back from this first reaction and see homelessness for what it is, we can begin to solve it. Homelessness is actually the cutting of corners, misalignment of values, and abdication of responsibility for maintaining a balanced, healthy community. While personal choice and responsibility cannot be denied as a contributing source of one's own failure, we have to also recognize that our society has allowed an abandonment of its own understanding that we are only as strong as our weakest link. Homelessness is not just a lack of housing. It is the failure of every social safety net system, including our own familial networks, to provide the care one needs to weather some of life's most challenging moments. Whether it's addiction, mental illness, physical health, divorce, job loss, trauma, poverty, violence, rising rents, the cost of living outpacing wages, eviction, race, or simply being born in the wrong zip code, people fall through the cracks. No, gaping holes in our systems. We have allowed this abdication for decades and created a concentration of forces so powerful they have severed our very core as a society. Across the country, communities are fighting over how to make the homeless disappear. The current federal administration has threatened to clean up the streets by force in places like Los Angeles and San Francisco. The forces that brought us here feel too challenging and too long of a haul to fix. So instead, we fight over who has the constitutional right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, instead of asking how we strike the balance needed to have strong, healthy communities, how to correct for decades of neglect and economic forces that swing wildly and feel uncontrollable, how to give everyone a healthy and safe existence. As much as you don't want to step over someone sleeping outside, they don't want to sleep outside. There is a common goal and a shared set of values on which to build our solutions. We just have to be willing to do the work long-term together. Across our country, 567,715 individuals were experiencing homelessness on a single night in January 2019, according to the Department of Housing and Urban Development. That's 17 out of every 10,000 people in America. The Houston region accounts for roughly 4,000 of that national total today, with a rate of 6.5 per 10,000 individuals. Just 10 years ago, Houston's homeless count was hovering around 8,500. That's over a 50% reduction, and Houston remains one of America's most committed and successful major cities on this issue. I know this is likely not the first time you are hearing about the success and national reputation of Houston's homeless response system, called The Way Home. I'm also sure you're struggling to reconcile that supposed success with what you experience on a day-to-day basis in downtown. To fully reconcile this, we must go on a journey together to understand the forces at play, how homeless systems work to react to or influence those forces, and the competing interests and limiting factors that slow progress. No single factor is responsible for someone's homelessness. It is a series of factors that build and ultimately manifest as homelessness. These factors are not solely dictated by individual choice. There are forces at play that can limit or enhance the range of choices and make all the difference. To understand this, let's imagine you lose your job as a waiter at a restaurant because of a global pandemic. Bills are piling up, rent is still due. You're confined to your home and you begin to cripple under the weight of these pressures and suffer a mental health crisis. Seek help, but cannot afford the medications. You are caught between a series of forces that you have no control over and that relegate you to instability regardless of your choice. Add to this any type of trauma, illness, unexpected bills, addiction, or violence, and you are further confined to a life of hopeless cycling. When these forces are limiting choices en masse in our society, homeless populations explode. Just look at the West Coast. As property values rise, rents rise, and redevelopment takes place, they eliminate naturally occurring affordable housing. This is all done with the best of intentions to modernize communities and infrastructure, to enhance transportation, and spur the economy. The problem is social safety nets and income are not growing proportionally to counteract the rising rent. As a result, folks are pouring into the streets. Seattle, San Francisco, Los Angeles, Portland, and almost every urban setting on the West Coast saw double-digit growth in the percentages of individuals sleeping outside. Unfortunately, this alarming trend is not confined to the West Coast. Denver now reports over 1,300 people sleeping in tents on its downtown streets alone. Las Vegas has more than 3,000 people sleeping outside on any given night. Dallas has seen a nearly 50% increase in unsheltered homelessness in the last 3 years. Ultimately, our leaders forgot to consider the unintended consequences of these good intentions on a more marginalized part of the community. They failed to consider how much this could disrupt the balance of a community. How will the janitor or street cleaner in these newly developed areas live here? Will we pay them more so they can? Will we include affordable housing as part of our developments to ensure a mix of incomes can thrive? Will we allow someone who has struggled in the past to live in our neighborhood or simply deny them because of their credit or background? Often, we don't see the value of these acts until we are stepping over people sleeping on our newly poured sidewalks. These activities never seem to pencil in our development plans, but to ignore these forces as contributing factors to homelessness is naive and costly as a society. Given an understanding of these forces, it makes sense that a homelessness response system can not only consist of emergency shelters. They must be comprehensive rehousing solutions that work to influence the creation, preservation, and targeting of affordable housing. For ages, we have been led to believe that charitable organizations providing food, shelter, and services are enough to help an individual make better choices and end homelessness and poverty. The harsh reality is these services alone cannot begin to counter the forces of economic and social displacement. If we look historically at some of our most challenging times in America, bread lines fed people, but it was investment in economic security programs and affordable housing that pulled these families out of the devastating poverty and homelessness. Research shows that increasing access to affordable housing is the most cost-effective way to reduce intergenerational and childhood poverty and to increase economic mobility in the United States. If we want to see substantial and sustained change in our community, we must make an investment in the comprehensive solution, infuse affordable housing into all our development and policy choices, and build systems that return and stabilize individuals in housing as quickly as possible. We have to stop pretending charity is enough. The Way Home in Houston has done just that. In 2012, the Coalition for the Homeless, the backbone agency leading a consortium of over 100 homeless service providers, recognized, along with its city, county, and private funding partners, its own limits and its own failure to understand and account for these forces. At the time, on any given night, more people were sleeping outside than in a shelter bed. 4,500 people slept outside. The easy answer would have been to add more shelter beds, but the collective leadership understood doing so would only partially solve for the unsheltered problem and would not solve for the lack of affordable housing that was keeping our homeless count high and these individuals without a home. A comprehensive plan was prepared with the help of the entire stakeholder community, including over 100 provider organizations. With the leadership of Mayor Parker, an audacious set of goals was established to begin targeting resources and development to support the rehousing of thousands as quickly as possible. This meant the creation of 2,500 units of permanent supportive housing, the targeting of veterans and individuals experiencing chronic homelessness for the first housing placements, and enhancing services to help individuals stay housed. This reorganization and strategic plan could not have come at a better time. It allowed Houston to fully transform its homeless response system, resulting in a 70% reduction in unsheltered homelessness, the successful rehousing of tens of thousands of individuals, as well as the effective end to veteran homelessness, before the next set of forces hit: Hurricane Harvey, bail reform, and COVID-19. The Way Home was ready in each of these instances to react, harness, and counter these forces, each time enhancing its homeless system to respond to a larger and more complex population. Mayor Turner immediately took up the charge upon his inauguration and challenged the community to push further, house 500 more individuals in short order, and boosted the investments in rehousing activities. After Hurricane Harvey, Mayor Turner immediately activated the Way Home inside the George R. Brown shelter to prepare and execute a plan to rehouse disaster survivors. For the first time, instead of closing the disaster shelter and pushing anyone remaining outside, the Way Home rehoused over 800 homeless survivors in 46 days with FEMA funding. Within 9 months, all but a handful had either taken over the lease, moved to another unit, or returned to family and friends. This model was then replicated by the state of North Carolina and Puerto Rico during their respective hurricanes and fully activated as part of HUD and FEMA's national COVID-19 response strategy. Interestingly, the best public health response in all scenarios has been to help individuals secure non-congregate housing. This is an approach fully embraced by those needing shelter. It reduces trauma, is the best way to limit the spread of infectious disease, and limits or even reverses the ability of these forces to increase homeless numbers. To that end, the Way Home immediately recognized its rehousing system as an effective public health tool and the need to double down on rehousing. The CARES Act, making unprecedented levels of federal funding available, including resources for infectious disease control among the homeless, positioned the Way Home to create a $65 million COVID CARES rehousing program called CHIP. This plan will rehouse about 5,000 individuals experiencing or at risk of homelessness over the next 2 years, substantially reducing homelessness and thus the spread of COVID-19 among this population and the community. Essentially, this plan puts the homeless rehousing system on steroids and positions it to clear the remaining backlog of homeless individuals waiting for housing. This is a very smart move, given the massive wave of evictions that are likely coming in the near future, given the next force we must reckon with. The Way Home has one of the most aggressive and determined plans to prepare for this next wave. This plan is backed by a powerful joint funding model. The city and county came together and provided $56 million in public funding, and the remaining $9 million is being raised from private sources. This program launched in early October and is already housing people and creating more than 150 new employment opportunities. The Way Home and its partners did not stop with the COVID CARES housing plan. They also leveraged this moment to bring new facilities into the homeless rehousing system to serve those who need mental health treatment or other specialized temporary housing before they enter their permanent housing units. These facilities will comply with new COVID non-congregate sheltering best practices and cast an even wider net to serve folks coming out of hospitals and jails. Additionally, it also targets more assertive outreach efforts for those sleeping outside with serious mental illness. These people have not been able to embrace the offer of permanent supportive housing without more substantial mental health intervention. The beauty of introducing these facilities at this point in the evolution of the homeless response system is that the system will have the ability to prioritize these individuals for housing, ensuring a continuum of service and breaking the cycle that has kept many of these individuals homeless on our downtown streets for years. I hope you can see now how impressive the Houston homeless response system truly is. It is a model system that is systematically confronting the forces that drive homelessness and closing these gaping holes across systems so no one falls through the cracks. It is not glamorous work and rarely gets the credit it deserves, mostly given the complexity and its own imperfections. It is also an incomplete system. I think you can appreciate the massive lift required to counter the various forces at play and the time it takes to have a measurable effect. Houston is moving faster than anyone else, and while that still may not be fast enough for many, it is the approach that brings our community into balance and positions us for success long into the future. Imagine what Houston could be experiencing if we had not made this adjustment in 2012. If we let those 8,500 individuals on any given night grow to 10,000 and then 12,000 after Harvey, Houston would be rivaling New York and Los Angeles, the Bay Area, Seattle, and San Diego. Instead, Houston now ranks among the 10 cities with the lowest homeless population per capita. So where do we go from here? There is still work to be done. Homelessness is still present and visible. That reminder of our failure to achieve the community and hope we desire for all Houstonians is ever present. These next plans will move us closer to the balance we seek and further position Houston to redefine homelessness response. We don't have to look elsewhere for solutions. We have to keep embracing our path, stare down failure, understand the complexity beneath, and systematically dismantle the forces that hold us back so we can build a strong and vibrant community for all.